There are things worse than death. I didn't learn that from books or dry university lectures. I learned it from the eyes of Subject 402, the Mirror Man. No, wait. It doesn't have eyes. Saying that wouldn't be accurate. Subject 402 is a human-shaped, perfectly reflective surface, about 1.75 meters tall, standing alone in the corner of Interview Room 7 at the ASP, Asher State Penitentiary, or, as we often call it, the prison of things that shouldn't exist. I remember my first interview with it like it was yesterday. Warden Parker stood outside in the observation booth. She told me, "Barry, just talk to it like normal. Record its reactions. We need to know if it can be integrated." Integrated. The word sounded so ironic when standing before a creature where, just by looking at it, you could see yourself looking back, but not from your own perspective. It reflects you from its perspective. I stepped into the room. The iron door slammed shut behind me with a sharp, heavy thud. The air in the room was unnaturally cold. My breath turned into thin wisps of mist. Subject 402 stood there, motionless as a monument. I approached and opened my notebook. I am Dr. Stephen Barry. Today is March 14, 2025. This is the first interview with Subject 402. The Mirror Man didn't respond. It just stood still. But as I looked into its shimmering surface, I saw myself, not as I was standing there, but as if I were standing on the other side, looking out. My reflection in the Mirror Man was smiling, a cold, mocking smile. I was not smiling. "You know, Stephen," my reflection said, its voice identical to mine, but dripping with malice. "You don't really believe in this job. You think things like me should be destroyed, not studied." I tried to remain calm, writing in my notebook. Subject 402 exhibits the ability to read minds or replicate the deep-seated psychology of the subject. And what about that thought of your little girl, the 12-year-old girl who died in the fire? You still dream of her every night. She screams, calling your name, but you can't save her because you ran away. My hand trembled. I put the pen down. "That's not the truth," I whispered. "Oh, but it is the truth, Stephen, in your mind. It is always the truth." The reflection paused, tilting its head, its smile widening, wider than any human face should be capable of. "And when you look into the mirror every morning, you will see me forever." After that session, I didn't dare look into a mirror for 3 straight days. Before the Mirror Man, there was the Name Whisperer. Subject 271 had no physical form. It existed as a stream of sound, a raspy, gravelly voice echoing through the corridors of the second floor. The FRB had confined it within a completely soundproof chamber, but here was the strange part. It only spoke when someone was listening. My job was to record what it said. Warden Parker believed that if we can understand the mechanics of the Name Whisperer, we would know how to neutralize hundreds of similar entities out there. I sat before the microphone in the observation booth. The monitors displayed the audio frequency charts. Everything was silent. I spoke. "Subject 271, tell me your name." Immediately, the voice rose, not through the speakers, but directly inside my head. "Sarah, Emily, Marcus, David." Those were the names of the people who died in the fire I witnessed back when I was a medical intern at the hospital, the nightmare that had haunted me for the last 10 years. "How do you know?" I screamed. "I don't know. You know. You always remember. You remember every single name. And now they belong to me." After that interview, for 3 weeks, I couldn't remember my own parents' names. Every time I tried to call out to them, there was only that raspy whisper in my head. They have no names anymore. They belong to me. Warden Parker summoned me to her office on a late afternoon in January 2026. She was a tall, gaunt woman, with skin so pale she looked as if she rarely saw the sun. Her eyes were always hidden behind a pair of aviator glasses, even indoors. I had never seen her real eyes. Rumor had it she was once a Class 3 subject before being reconstructed by the FRB to work for the organization, but no one dared to ask. Her office reeked of old paper and disinfectant. Maps of the ASP hung on the walls, with floors color-coded by threat level: green for floors 1 through 3, low risk; yellow for floors 4 through 5, medium risk; and red for floor 6, extreme danger. Floor 7 was not marked with any color at all, just a blank space with the words, "Restricted access only." "Sit down, Barry," she said, her voice deep and hollow, like the sound of stones rolling at the bottom of a deep well. I sat. She pushed a brown envelope across the desk, along with an unlabeled pill bottle. "You need a break," she said bluntly. "I saw the way you looked into the restroom mirror yesterday. You stood still for over 10 minutes without blinking, as if you were waiting for something to happen." I swallowed hard. "I'm fine, Warden. It's just—" "You're not fine," she interrupted. "No one works with Subject 402 and stays fine. This envelope contains the address of a small town in Arizona called Merrow. It's quiet, sparsely populated, nothing special. Go there for 2 weeks. Breathe the desert air. Forget about the ASP. That's an order." I took the envelope. Inside was a slip of paper with the address of a small hotel, a map, and a blank check with no amount written on it. "What is this medicine?" I asked, picking up the bottle. "A sedative. If you have nightmares, take 2 pills, no more." She paused, then added in a low voice, almost a whisper, "And Barry, if you see anything strange in Merrow, do not investigate. Call me immediately. Understood?" I nodded, though I felt a cold shiver run down my spine. The drive from ASP to Merrow was about 8 hours, cutting straight through the heart of the Arizona desert. I set off at 5 a.m., while the sky was still a pale purple and the air was bone-chillingly cold. The rental, an old gray Ford, hummed smoothly along the deserted highway. The radio caught nothing but static and occasional fading snippets of country music. I switched it off, letting the silence take over. The landscape outside slowly shifted. Distant mountain ranges gave way to red sand and withered cacti. The sun climbed higher, scorching the air until the temperature inside the car crept toward 40 degrees Celsius, despite the AC being on full blast. Around 2 p.m., I pulled over to the shoulder to rest. I stepped out, feeling the searing wind blast against my face like the breath of some invisible, gargantuan beast. Around me was absolute emptiness. No cars, no houses, just sand, rock, and a brilliant blue sky without a single cloud. I took a swig of water from a bottle, but immediately felt a wave of nausea. Something was wrong. It wasn't the heat or the exhaustion. It was a different sensation, a feeling of being watched. I turned to scan the desert. Nothing, just sand and stone. But I could have sworn I saw a shadow, a tall, humanoid figure standing far off near the horizon, as motionless as a pillar. I squinted, trying to see clearer. The figure vanished. Just a heat hallucination, I told myself. That's all. I turned back to the car, but before I could open the door, I heard a soft whisper, almost indistinguishable from the whistling wind. "Stephen, Barry." I slammed the car door shut, cranked the ignition, and sped away without daring to look back. Warden Parker summoned me to floor 5 on a rainy night in October. "We just captured a group," she said over the comms. 7 specimens. They were living as normal people in a small town near the Mexican border. No one knew they weren't human until one of them was hit by a truck and shattered. When I descended to floor 5, I saw them. 7 people confined in 7 separate bulletproof glass chambers. They looked exactly like ordinary humans, a middle-aged man in a dress shirt, a long-haired woman, a boy of about 12. But something was wrong. They didn't blink. They didn't breathe. They just stood there, staring out with hollow eyes. "What are they?" I asked. "We call them hollow men," a technician replied, reading from a thick file. "They are entities birthed by the abyss, the void that exists between reality and nothingness. They flay the skin of the dead, wear it, and live as humans. Inside, they have no organs, no blood, only a dark collective will." "Are they dangerous?" "Not directly. They don't attack people, they just replace. They live among humans, learning, observing, and gradually spreading. If left undetected, a small town could be completely overtaken by them within a year." I looked at the boy in the glass chamber. He stood motionless, his eyes fixed directly at me. No blinking, no breathing. Then he smiled. A perfect smile, the kind of smile a normal child would give when asking for candy. But in his eyes, there was no soul. "What are we going to do with them?" I asked Warden Parker. She looked at me through her dark aviator glasses. "We're going to study them, and if possible, we'll learn how to turn them back into something controllable." But her voice didn't sound convinced. Realizing the truth. I sat there, staring at Hank's back. The serial number, ASP S112, felt like a scar burned into my retina. A hollow man. Hank was a hollow man, one of the entities the FRB had supposedly captured. But why was he here? Why was he free? Hank turned back, placing the cup of coffee on the table. "Here you go, doctor, just the way you like it. Black, no sugar." "How do you know how I take my coffee?" I asked, struggling to keep my voice steady. Hank tilted his head, a movement too smooth, too surreal. "As I said, we all know each other here. We are family." I looked out the window. Outside, a few people were walking down the street. They moved with an eerily rhythmic stride, too synchronized, too similar, and they were all smiling, the exact same smile. I stood up, leaving the coffee untouched. "Thank you. I have to go." "Dr. Barry," Hank called after me, his voice still gentle, still polite. "If you need anything at all, just let us know. We are always here to help family." I didn't answer. I simply pushed through the door and stepped outside, feeling as if dozens of eyes were tracking my every move. I drove out of town, my heart hammering against my ribs. My hands shook so violently that I had to pull over to the shoulder to regain my composure. I pulled out my cell phone, intending to call Warden Parker, but there was no service, no 4G, not even a single bar of signal. "Damn it," I cursed under my breath. I looked back at the town of Marrow through the rearview mirror. Those people were still standing there, motionless as wax figures. Every single one of them was facing me. I needed to find a signal, or better yet, I needed evidence, clear proof that Marrow was not a normal town, that the FRB was conducting a dangerous experiment. I opened the map Parker had given me. On it, there was a small red dot on the edge of town, near an area marked Marrow Lake. A lake in the middle of the Arizona desert? It sounded absurd, but I had no other choice. Finding the lake. The road to Marrow Lake was a rugged dirt path, devoid of signs, marked only by faint tire tracks etched into the red sand. I drove slowly, carefully navigating around large boulders and patches of thorn bush. The sun had set, the sky shifting to a pale purple before bleeding into black. There were no streetlights, only the beams of my headlights sliced through the encroaching darkness. Then I smelt it. the scent of sea salt. It was so thick it was suffocating. Arizona is a land of sand and cacti, hundreds of kilometers away from the nearest coast. There was no logical reason for this smell to exist. But as I stepped out of the car, the salt air lunged into my lungs, mingled with something else, the briny stench of rotting flesh, of dead sea creatures. Marrow Lake lay before me. It was no ordinary body of water. The surface was so impossibly still that it felt surreal, without a single ripple, reflecting the black sky like a gargantuan mirror. The water was pitch black, not because of the shadows, but due to its very nature, as if it weren't water at all, but thin oil or something far darker. I walked down to the shore. The sand was damp beneath my feet, ice cold. I knelt, reaching out to touch the surface. Immediately, a jolt of electricity surged up my arm. The water wasn't cold. It was warm, warm as human blood. I yanked my hand back, frantically wiping it on my trousers. Then, the singing began. Kayla's song, the siren. It wasn't a melody. It was a vibration in reality itself. The notes were so low they made my teeth ache and my chest tighten. I felt my heart skip beats, as if it were struggling to pulse in rhythm with the song. From the center of the pitch-black lake, a figure rose slowly. It was Kayla. She no longer bore the disheveled look of a prisoner. She stood atop the water, draped in a gown woven from threads of white light, a divine material I had seen only once before in a hallucination while facing the weaver on floor 7. Kayla's hair drifted as if she were submerged in water, despite the lack of wind. Her eyes glowed with a vibrant emerald light, reminiscent of deep-sea bioluminescence. "Hello, Stephen," she said. Her voice didn't originate from vocal cords. It resonated from the lake itself, from the surrounding thickets, from the rocks, and from the very air. "How do you like my gift? This entire town is singing for you." I turned to look along the shore. My heart sank into my stomach. In the shadows of the weeping willows, dozens of Marrow residents were standing. They stood ankle-deep in the cold water, eyes wide and unblinking, mouths agape to the point that their jaws were nearly dislocated. And they were singing. No, not singing. They were emitting strange, hollow groans, like the low moans of deep-sea leviathans. Those sounds blended together, forming a horrific symphony that made the air tremble. They were no longer human. They were biological loudspeakers. Their souls had been crushed to amplify the siren's power. "What do you want, Kayla?" I screamed, my legs trembling on the damp sand. "Peace, Stephen," she replied, her voice sweet yet venomous. "It's what you promised us in those iron cages, yet never delivered. Here, I am queen. I give them peace by stripping away the pain of being human." She stepped toward me, her feet not touching the surface, but hovering just above it. "Come down here, Stephen. Beneath this sand, the heart of old Vikram is beating. It is turning this desert into our eternal forest, a new world where humans and monsters have no boundaries." I backed away, my hand gripping Parker's pill bottle inside my pocket. "Don't you understand?" Kayla smiled, a look of profound pity in her eyes. "Marrow isn't a resort town, it's a laboratory. The FRB created it to test the reintegration program. They wanted to know if entities like us could coexist with humans, and the answer is..." She spread her arms. All the people standing in the lake turned their heads to look at me simultaneously, hollow eyes, soulless smiles. Yes, but not in the way they expected. I turned and bolted toward the car, but when I arrived, I saw them. The hollow men from town had already surrounded the vehicle. Hank was still wearing that same radiant, fixed smile. "Dr. Barry shouldn't leave the family. We were very worried about you." I recoiled, trapped between them and the lake. There was no way out. In a fit of sheer desperation, I ran, not toward the car, but back toward the town, aiming for the only building with lights still burning, the mayor's office. The hollow men didn't give chase. They simply stood their ground, watching me with those harrowing smiles. I dashed through the deserted streets, breath ragged and legs trembling. The mayor's office was a 2-story wooden structure, its large windows emitting a deceptively warm golden glow. I threw the door open and burst inside. And then I stopped dead. Perched upon the desk was a creature. It wasn't human. It wasn't a hollow man. It was something else entirely. He stood nearly 2.5 meters tall, a tattered suit clinging to a skinless body. I could see the pulsating raw red muscle, the pale white tendons coiled around bone. His face was a rounded mass of flesh, perforated by hundreds of tiny holes. No eyes, no nose, only a cavernous mouth lined with needle-like teeth. Subject 88, the Name Collector. An extremely dangerous Class 4 entity that had vanished from FRB records back in the 90s. Stephen Barry, he hissed. The sound bore no resemblance to a human voice. It was like the wind whistling through limestone caverns filled with bleached bones. Your name, it tastes of doubt and betrayal. I need it. He extended a spindly, impossibly long finger toward me. The moment that finger pointed at an object in the room, the wooden desk, a horrific malfunction occurred within my brain. I looked at the desk, but the concept of it vanished. I saw a slab of wood with 4 legs, but I no longer knew what it was for, or even what word to call it. He was erasing language from my mind. He devoured names to strip humans of their dominion over reality. Without a name, a monster is no longer a subject of study. They become unnameable gods. I looked at the door, and suddenly the concept of an exit was wiped clean. I stood frozen like a child lost in a labyrinth of meaningless shapes. My name is Stephen Barry, I roared, using every shred of consciousness to cling to my identity. You are just a prisoner. He laughed, a disgusting, wheezing rattle. He reached out to touch my forehead. Boom, boom. The office door shattered into splinters. Warden Parker stepped in, her cowboy hat tilted to one side, wielding a shotgun loaded with silver shells that radiated a deathly supernatural chill. She fired 2 rounds directly into the name collector's chest. A burst of violet light erupted, searing his raw muscle fibers and forcing him to recoil into the darkness of the corner. Run! Parker screamed. Parker grabbed my collar, dragging me in a desperate sprint to the rooftop, where a black FRB helicopter sat waiting, its blades tearing through the stagnant air of Marrow. As the chopper lifted off, I looked down. The entire town of Marrow was now shrouded in a pale violet mist. The residents, or more accurately, the vessels, stood facing the lake, their mouths still chanting Kayla's symphony. From beneath the lake, something gargantuan was emerging. Vivid green vines, thick as pillars, surged from the water and coiled around the buildings. These were the roots of Old Vikram, the 1,000-year-old tree from Flora 6 that I had thought was incinerated long ago. This town is gone, Parker said, her voice colder than death itself. Then she took off her aviators. For the first time, I saw Warden Parker's real eyes. They were a burning crimson, like boiling blood. There were no whites, just 2 deep red orbs with tiny black flecks that moved incessantly. Why didn't the FRB stop this? I screamed over the roar of the helicopter engine. You have guards, weapons, even Class 5 entities in your service. Parker looked at me. A bitter smile touched her pale face. Stephen, don't you understand yet? She pointed toward the horizon. In the distance, major cities like Phoenix and Las Vegas no longer glowed with normal electricity. They emitted an eerie, sickly green luminescence. Colossal creatures, as tall as skyscrapers, moved slowly through the streets. I saw a beast resembling an octopus, its dozens of tentacles coiling around high-rises. Another looked like a giant, but with 3 heads and 6 arms. The FRB you knew, that scientific research organization, it collapsed 20 years ago. Everything you saw at headquarters, the meetings, the reports, it was all just a play staged by the Weaver. What does that mean? It means the world out there was taken by monsters long ago. We aren't the ones guarding the monsters. We are the last survivors hiding within our own world. I looked down at my hand. The scar on my index finger, the one I'd had since childhood, began to ooze a shimmering white resin. It pulsed in time with Kayla's song below. I realized the most horrific truth of all. I wasn't Dr. Stephen Barry on vacation. I was a frayed thread that the Weaver was trying to stitch back into her tapestry of horror.